Welcome to the Dr. Lori Mars podcast, where she interviews experts in health and science, sharing their expertise so you can live your healthiest life.
This episode of the podcast is proudly sponsored by Fit Vegan Coaching, the world's leading whole food, plant-based body recomposition program for Gen X and baby boomers. Founded by Maxime, whose personal journey began after losing his ex-fiancée to breast cancer, Fit Vegan Coaching is on a mission to disease-proof the world through the transformative power of plant-based eating and fitness. This program is the Rolls-Royce of plant-based coaching, offering all-inclusive services, personalized plans, world-class accountability, lifelong support, and more. Say goodbye to the yo-yo dieting and embrace a lasting transformation that will rev up your metabolism even post-transformation. Ready to take charge of your health and vitality? Head over to fitvegan.ca, that's fitvegan.ca, and mention Dr. Lori for exclusive bonus savings when you sign up. Don't miss this opportunity to join the movement towards a healthier, fitter, and more vibrant you. This episode of the podcast is proudly sponsored by The Healing Kitchen, your path to vibrant health. Immerse yourself in the transformative program, guided by the combined expertise of myself, Dr. Lori Marbus, and Chef Brittany Giroudi, who has lost 70 pounds on a whole food plant-based diet. Here's what's in store for you. Virtual weekly sessions. Engage in an immersive 60-minute virtual session every single week, where you'll delve into the world of wholesome plant-based goodness right from your own kitchen. Cooking with Brittany the first half hour. Unleash your inner chef as you're captivated by Chef Brittany Giroudi's culinary mastery that will delight your taste buds and nourish your body. Medical Q&A with Dr. Lori the last half hour. Prioritize your well-being during the second half hour. I will personally address your medical inquiries, providing evidence-based insights and personalized advice, empowering you to make informed choices for your health. So join us on the Healing Kitchen to help you step into a healthier and most vibrant future. Welcome to the podcast. We haven't had a guest on in a bit. We're getting back into it. And who other than to have on the show would be Chef AJ, who we all love and adore. How are you today, AJ?
Thank you. I don't know, does everybody love and adore me? That's nice to hear. Thank you, Dr.
Anybody that's my friend.
I remember when I met you, you were just so loving and accepting. We met at the PCRM conference and I was doing the splits and you were just so fun.
On the wall. Yeah, I think I did an interview with you, like laying down with my head next to you because you were laying down. It was a fun video.
I broke my back in my 20s. And so I sometimes have pain. And one of those stretches, the legs up against the wall, it's just a fantastic stretch, not just for back pain, but for relaxation. So I've been known to do it at airports, at conferences, because what are you going to do? You don't always have time to get back to your hotel.
No, one of my boys did cross country running and they did that type of stretch all the time. Yeah, it was great.
It's a good one. People should do it before they go to bed and they'll sleep like a baby.
Oh, all right. Next patient I have that needs that I'm going to be sending. This is a Chef AJ special. Well, we have some fun to talk about, and you have a new book coming out here. And honestly, Sweet Indulgence, what a it's a lovely name. It would pull me from the shelf anyway. Can we talk a little bit? You want to share the cover?
Absolutely. So this is the cover, and this is the cupcake that started it all, because Dr. Neil Barnard wrote the foreword, and he actually ate this cupcake. And this is a cupcake that I made on cupcake boards. And yes, it's called Chef AJ Sweet Indulgence because the publisher didn't like the title suggested by Dr. Alan Goldhammer, which was Desserts That Won't Kill You.
Yeah, you really want to bring people in for delectable yumminess versus it won't kill you. That's hilarious. But coming from Goldhammer, I wouldn't expect any less.
It's hilarious.
So tell us a little bit. Can we just walk back to maybe those who don't know your history as much of, where did this love of sweets start?
God, it started in the womb, Dr. Marbus. And from what I understand from some researchers now about food addiction and sugar addiction, it started even before my mom got pregnant with me, because apparently what your mother eats has a profound effect on your life and your preferences. And my mother loved chocolate, especially M&Ms with peanuts. So I'm thinking that must have been her like main pregnancy food. But I don't want to say who doesn't love dessert, because there's always that rare person. But desserts are fun. They're delicious. They're sweet. They're luscious, and they tend to bring people together. And I just remember loving them from as long as I can remember. But my first memory really of making desserts was when I was 7 years old. For Hanukkah, I got an easy bake oven. And boy, that was so easy because they had these little packages. They were white and they would be like chocolate vanilla. And you would just mix it with water and you'd put it in the mold. And it literally was a light bulb. And I would just sit there and just watch, and like a cake would manifest. And so I've always had a fascination with baking, because cooking is great, but cooking is very improvisational. It's kind of, I think of it more as an art form, but baking is actual science. And if you follow a recipe, like, I think that's so cool. Like, cakes rise, souffles fall. So that's when I started making desserts. But I just remember eating lots of desserts growing up because they were just there. And we always seemed to have dessert after dinner. And my mom was a really wonderful cook. Oh my God, she'd make a chocolate cake, a triple layer chocolate cake. And the thing is we couldn't have dessert unless we finished our meal, which, basically isn't the greatest thing, because guess what? You teach yourself to overeat just to get dessert. And so, I was obese from the time I was 5 years old until like I was like almost 50 years old. And that was like 15 years ago. So, we just had a lot of sugar. Processed food really started coming into its own in the 60s when I was born. And they may have known it was addictive. I think they did, but I think our parents didn't buy it for us because they thought it was going to be unhealthy or addictive. It was just a convenience. If you have a frozen Swanson's TV dinner, then you can have that one night when mom goes to the PTA meeting, for example. And, it's much easier to take a box of cereal and a kid could pour it themselves in a bowl than maybe cooking oatmeal on the stove. And so we had every cereal, Kaboom, Trix, Sugar Smacks, Captain Crunch with, literally our cabinet was the cereal aisle, whatever they had. And, I loved it because I would keep eating cereal because I really wanted the prize, and the prize was always down at the bottom. So you kept pouring more cereal. And the funny thing is that even though these were sweetened cereals, I still had to add sugar to them. So, because my taste had adapted to just such a high level of sweet. And again, my mom has passed away, so I can't really ask her why at 4 years old she was serving me coffee with cream and sugar. But I was already hyped up on sugar and caffeine from the time I was 4 years old. So I had a predilection for everything sweet. But I want to give people hope that if that is them. Now, it's not that I dislike sweets, but if you gave me a choice of sweet or savory, you gave me the most rich, my favorite dessert, tiramisu, or chips and salsa, or sushi, I'm going with the savory.
Yeah, I'm a big chips and salsa fan myself. So I love the fact that Easy Bake. I remember getting an Easy Bake. I think I was 8, and my grams got it from my grandmother. It was so fun. But when you look at desserts in general, and you write this amazing, book, there's 150 plus recipes, and how do you even begin to come up with a dessert that looks and tastes like yours do? I mean, that's just I appreciate the science piece of that. So, but it's mind boggling to think about, how do you even start?
Well, most of the time, my desserts have come from a request from somebody else to make something first vegan and then second healthy vegan. And by healthy vegan, I mean no oil, because none of the recipes in my book have oil. Some are richer and higher in fat because they have nuts, seeds, and avocado. So it usually starts with somebody saying, hey, can you make my grandmother's, cherry strudel? And they give me the recipe. And sometimes I can, sometimes I can't. It's always a fun challenge what you come up with. So usually I think that's how it starts, is a request from somebody else.
Okay, well, that's a great start. So what are some of the things that you found to be very, very helpful? Let's say someone does have a recipe from a grandparent or something, maybe 3 or 4 of your, substitutions for different ingredients. You found something that really works nicely.
Well, here's the thing. So the first steps, just make something vegan, isn't that hard anymore. Because if you think about it, butter, you have vegan butter now, Miyoko's butter, right? So you can swap that out. So if that's the only animal product in it, you're done. Let's say it has cream cheese, like in a cheesecake. Again, Miyoko to the to the rescue. There's other brands of
Right.
cream cheeses. You can make your own. So just to make it vegan is not that hard. And eggs, oh my gosh. I mean, there actually is something you can buy. I saw it in the store that's like a liquid vegan egg. I've never used.
Just egg.
Right. Yeah.
Made from mung beans.
Isn't that cool? And whoever invented this aquafaba thing, they're a genius, I gotta say. That is so cool. You can whip it into meringues, but you can also make an egg out of chia seeds, out of flax seeds. And the truth is you don't always need an egg for things to rise. A lot of people are not old enough to remember the Depression. And I wasn't there, but I had a cookbook from the Depression, and they had things called depression cake because back then the ingredients were scarce. So butter was scarce. Eggs were scarce. So they had to figure out a way to bake without these things. And guess what? They were just incidentally vegan. So I remember a recipe, and I keep trying to find it because a lot of my cakes were based on this from an old Hershey's cookbook, where basically, it was flour, it was sugar, and it was cocoa powder. And it had oil, but instead of the eggs, by using vinegar, and they were using white vinegar, I usually use apple cider, in combination with, it was either baking powder or baking soda or both, it rose. I mean, so a lot of this has been around, but it wasn't labeled vegan back then.
Oh, that's really interesting.
Yeah.
And just kind of getting back to, you had an interest in cookbooks where most people were maybe doing other things. You were like diving into recipes and cookbooks, and you read like 27 volume.
I know
something.
my aunt, I lived with an aunt growing up, and her mother was a cordon bleu chef, had a restaurant, a 5-star restaurant in Switzerland. And somehow they had this Time Life collection. It was like Encyclopedia Britannica, but for cookbooks. And I just loved reading cookbooks. And to this day, I don't think I've ever really read a full fiction or nonfiction book. And thank goodness for Cliff Notes back in the day and Audible now. But I love cookbooks. They're just, I don't know. They're just fun to read. And you get inspiration for them too,
Right.
not necessarily with copying them, but you get ideas from other people's work that they say you can't copyright a recipe. Not that I would ever intentionally steal somebody's recipe, but like you see something like, wow, I never thought to combine that with that. And also here's another place to get Iron Chef inspiration from. Iron Chef competitions. Now, I know a lot of people in their daily life are not going to be speaking in public like I am, where they're going to be able to do this, but you can do your own Iron Chef or Chopped at home simply by going into your refrigerator or pantry, picking out the ingredients you have, and just make something. People are so afraid to be improvisational, but that's the best way to cook and to learn to cook. And when I teach cooking, both hands-on and demonstrational, I try to teach that, because yes, it's fine to follow recipes, but then you're always going to be tied to that recipe. And what if you don't have that spice, or what if you don't have that ingredient? So learn the basics of cooking and baking, and then try to figure it out yourself, because that can be really, really fun for people that are willing to be a little improvisational.
No, absolutely. I've had to reduce and rethink because I'm living in the RV full time now. Yeah, it's really interesting because I don't necessarily want to use my oven because it's really hot outside. So maybe I use the microwave or do something else. But yeah, so I totally appreciate being experimental. And there's so many people afraid to fail in the kitchen, right? So they think it's
not
sad.
a failure, because I mean, look, there's some things that you can't come back from. Like, for example, if you're making, let's just say, what it could be a soup or it could be a dessert. If you put too much salt in, or baking powder, baking soda, you really can't. You probably have to throw it out, or maybe something too much hot, unless you make another recipe. But the culinary school I went to said, it's not what you can make, it's what you can fix. And for the most part, even if it's not like, something that would be served in a 5-star restaurant in Paris, most stuff at least is edible, and you don't have to throw it out. And it may not look like the way you want it to look, but you got it. That's how you make it better, by you make it this way, and then, figure it out. I was going to say, some people go too far the other way, and they use the recipes as a template, as they should, but then they change it so much, and then they wonder why it didn't turn out. So I often recommend to people, if you're making somebody else's recipe, if you can, meaning, like, let's say if there's an ingredient you're allergic to, of course, not. But if you can, I always say, and I do this myself when I'm making somebody else's recipe, the first time, make it as written and then color outside the lines. Because I remember when my first book Unprocessed came out, I have this recipe for a nutrient-rich black bean soup that was always very popular. There's pounds of vegetables in it, greens, and there's corn, and there's sweet potatoes, and there's black beans, and there's spices. And this person wrote me a very angry email that it didn't turn out. And basically she said, well, I didn't have black beans, so I used chickpeas. I didn't have, rainbow chard, so I used mustard greens. It was by the time she told me her substitutions, there was literally nothing that was in my original recipe except for maybe the water or vegetable broth. And so you know what I mean? So you kind of have to
Oh, yeah,
I just
exactly.
remember that so much. And it's like, where is this my recipe at all? There's nothing black bean soup about this recipe.
Oh my goodness. And I love that so much. So I work with Brittany Giroudi, and we meet every week with our groups and stuff. And she's doing some great recipes, but it's funny some of the reactions people have. They're like, I love this, or oh, this isn't, more difficult enough for us. It's really fascinating. So I'd like to know, in your book, where would a beginner start with, like, what's a good recipe versus like what's the most like wow dessert,
Yeah.
So
Well,
what is the
okay. Yeah, and that's great, because there is something for everyone in this book. So we try to include everyone, like people that are raw foodists. There's even a few recipes that are raw. There's some recipes that are dehydrated. If you've never ever cooked before, I mean, you might want to start with like a smoothie or an ice cream, honestly, where it's going to be hard to mess it up because you're just putting things in a blender and pushing a button, honestly. When it comes to baking, there is a couple of recipes that I feel are very, very simple, like the snickerdoodles, the lemon poppy seed cookies. There's like 3 ingredients. And as long as you're familiar with using a food processor, I think you'd be pretty safe to make a recipe like that, or the thumbprint cookies. But if you've never made like a triple layer cake, I wouldn't make the German chocolate cake as the very first recipe that you make. Maybe work up to it. I try to make the recipes really easy. I have experience when I lived in LA, I used to teach vegan cooking to the blind at the Braille Institute. So I learned a lot of tips and tricks and shortcuts, and even tools, kitchen tools that can help people like cook easier. And if it helps, if it's good for a blind person, it's good for a sighted person. There's recipes that you make in the Instant Pot, like the apple pie rice pudding, which I would say that anybody that knows how to use a pressure cooker, it's very easy. You're taking leftover rice, you're cutting up an apple, putting in some plant milk or apple juice, some spices and some raisins, and pushing a button. Assuming you know how to use a pressure cooker. If you don't, you're going to have to first learn how to use that. So I think that most of the recipes are pretty easy. I try to always keep ingredients to 7 easily findable ingredients or less when I can. So I'm not trying to, make like a millefeuille or a Napoleon or do really hard French pastries. Like, that's incredible. I really am trying to make easy desserts, because everything I do has to be pretty easy or I won't do it. It's funny because the cupcake on the cover is probably the most difficult recipe on there, because the cupcake part is super easy. You're just mixing the ingredients in a blender, but then you got to poke a hole, and then you got to make the filling, which is a peanut butter cream filling. And then you got to let it cool, and then you got to make the chocolate peanut butter ganache. And then, if you want it to look pretty like this, you have to know how to use a pastry bag. Honestly, when I make these, I just take like an ice cream scoop and just mine are not that pretty. I mean, if I'm making it for family, if it's different if I was doing it for a presentation.
Yeah, absolutely. So so you have a wide variety, a spectrum of easy versus more detailed and more difficult, which is phenomenal. Where would you say is your favorite recipe? I know you've been asked this question quite a bit, so tell me.
Okay. Luckily, I have the book here. So, it's funny because some of the recipes are just not even recipes. Like, when we're teaching people how to make sorbet just out of frozen fruit. And, I got to say that banana ice cream never gets old. I mean, you would think after 35 years, I wouldn't love it, but I'm still as excited today to eat that as I was when I first discovered it, which was at a vegan meeting in 1987, when I first learned about the champion juicer. And now there are so many machines out there, that you can make it with. So, okay, I've got to find the rustic fruit tart. And you would have thought that because you know what? Because it's basically oats and fruit. And if you can imagine how easy that is, when you think about it, people make oats and fruits, as their breakfast.
Right.
So I'm sorry I didn't put this one because you would think I would have done this. Let's see. So what we did is instead of being in alphabetical order by recipe, we have these really cool categories. We have bake it, chill it, crunch it, dip it, freeze it, fry it, meaning air fry it, iron it, meaning using a waffle iron, lick it, nuke it, pop it, sip it, spoon it, spread it, sprinkle it, squeeze it. So it would be nice if everything was in alphabetical order, but I'm looking for the picture. But basically it's a crust that's just made out of oats and dates and a little vanilla powder if you want to put it in there. You can either bake it for 5 minutes to get that little stickiness off the date off, or you can just eat it raw. So a raw foodist could do that because they do have raw oats now, raw sprouted oats, and then you fill it with macerated berries. And what macerated just means is softened with a liquid. So you can soften fruit with, say, water, orange juice, pineapple juice. I like to use a California balsamic vinegar. You're basically using like a tablespoon of some kind of liquid to get it to be like syrupy. And that is that is my favorite because I feel like I'm eating like the healthiest dessert. I'm eating oats and I'm eating fruit.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you have such a vast experience with your culinary background. I mean, you've worked as a pastry chef previously.
I did. I finally found it. Here we go. Rustic fruit tart. And what I
Oh,
do is instead of making it a big, I make it into little ones so that everybody can have their own. And you can fill it with any fruit. Here we show blackberries and strawberries, but I've done it with peaches, pineapple, apple, pear. So that's my favorite because it's the easiest. I made it once when I was having this party and the guests were there like late. The party had ended and like everything was gone. And like this couple showed up and it's like, oh my God, when am I going to make them? And that's how I made up this recipe. But yeah, for about 5 years, I was the pastry chef at a restaurant in Los Angeles called Sante. And it wasn't a vegan restaurant, but it didn't matter because I auditioned basically just by baking one day. And I made a bunch of stuff and they said, okay, you're hired. And so a lot of the richer recipes, which are not ones I eat today, like the frozen peanut butter chocolate cheesecake, the German chocolate cake, these were restaurant recipes that I made. And I never wrote them down because I was always worried that like they'd get, somebody else there to make them. And so they were in my head. So now they're written down for everyone.
oh, wow.
Joy.
That's awesome. And so, as far as, I know we're coming up on the time that we had scheduled here, but as far as what is your favorite way for someone to take this? Like, where would you say that they should open this book? And, for me, I'm always usually drawn, not always to the beginning, like cookbooks and stuff. I usually tend to look for certain things. Where would you say someone should start? I love how you organize it. Maybe it's just by that, but
Well, sounds cliche, but I would start at the beginning because in the beginning, I tell the story of why there's no sugar in this book, no oil, no salt, only flour and 2 recipes, why dates I feel are the optimum sweetener, although I use other fruits in there like bananas and apples, pears, things like that. And then, I give a big list of all the possible tools you could use and why I like them. And also the introduction is great by Dr. Michael Gorn. He's a pediatric childhood obesity specialist at USC, and he explains why it is okay to eat fruit and whole fruit, nothing but the whole fruit, and why sugar, in his opinion, especially in the amounts that most Americans are eating it, and children for sure, is deleterious. So I would start at the beginning.
I think that's a great way. Yeah, you had a list of everything. I was thinking to myself as I was looking over your list, like I have no space for all this. I was like, what would be the 1 or 2 things?
Well, I would say for dessert making, then the food processor might be the most important. But for overall, just, plant-based eating, I would tell people a pressure cooker at first.
Yeah, I do have my Vitamix here. That's the one thing I said to my husband is it doesn't handle the Vitamix. We can't get the RV. So that literally was the ones I was like, that's the one thing I can't give up. So, well, this is fantastic. And so again, where can we get your book? when is it going to be available for the public,
Oh,
everybody?
thank you. So it comes out on Tuesday, August 27th. And if you purchase it in advance or up till midnight Pacific time on Saturday, August 31st, if you save your receipt and email it to sweetindulgencebook.com, there's a form there. We will send you over $1,000 worth of virtual bonuses, which include a video of all 156 recipes in the book. It took me 6 months to film this. So the bonus is worth more than the book, and you'll get other bonuses like several classes that I taught, like my Sweet Indulgence Masterclass, which is about 18 hours. So to thank people for pre-ordering, because the only way you can be a New York Times bestseller is pre-orders in the first 5 days. And then I mean, it still counts for a sale, but it won't count for that. So the bonuses are worth more than the book. And especially if you're somebody that is more of a visual learner, you'll have the video to go with the recipe, every single one of them.
Well, I would be line up here, like, listen, everybody, let's make Chef AJ a New York Times bestseller. So please get the book today. We'll put the link in the show notes, and you won't be disappointed. Wow, with all the extra bonuses, I can't even imagine. That sounds phenomenal. So thank you for putting this together and all the work that you've done. It's
thank you. I just want to show you a really fun photo from the book.
Yeah.
It's just, it's because you know, a photo for every recipe is there. But if we had every single photo on a page of 156 recipes, this book would be like 500 pages. So I had the idea, well, what if we could just do something like this? And it turns out it's a lot of people's favorite photo.
Yeah. So basically, those who are just listening, it's the spoons with the different
recipes. Right. So there's 10 things. It was the spooned category. So it's different puddings and things like that. So
that is so cool. No, that's absolutely.
Just to give people hope. This is the youngest person that ever took my master class. His name is Luca. He was 7 at the time. He'll be 9 this year. And he was able to make the strawberry chocolate cheesecake at 7 years.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, that tells it all. And there was also some pictures of you, or a picture of you when you were younger, when you were just getting started.
When I was as they would call it, when I was a little sugar addict, you know? You can see like that my first memories are just me eating cookies and stuff like that. I can't find it right now, but yeah, that was but luckily I was able to find, oh, here it is. Yeah, black and white. That's because we didn't have color photos back then. And you can see I was a bit overweight as a kid, but I always had a smile on my face when I was eating dessert, you know?
Absolutely. Wow. That is incredible. Oh my gosh. Well, thank you, AJ, for sharing your book with us. And
I appreciate it so much.
Yeah, and thank you for taking the time to do this. I mean, it's such an important piece, and I think it's a lot of people's downfall when they try to go eat healthy. And I think here's the one tool is all they need. Let's just get this going. You've had such great success with it. So thank you so much for being here today.
Yeah. I'll just end with a quote I learned from Dr. Neil Barnard when people are trying to get people to eat healthier. Draw them in with desserts, then hit them over the head with the kale.
He has got to be the most like suave individual. Like if everybody in the plant-based world, he was just so well spoken and gentle, and I love it. I love it.
Yeah,
It makes you giggle.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.